you're still at the restaurant? Oops, I went out with the girls, she wrote while sharing photos at the bar. I responded, it's fine. Then I cut her off completely. Now she's searching for me through everyone we know. Looking back, that text message was the perfect summary of our entire relationship, me waiting, her living her best life somewhere else, and both of us pretending it was normal. I'm John, a 31-year-old architectural engineer in Denver, and this is the story of how I finally stopped being someone's backup plan and learned that sometimes the most important conversations happen in complete silence. I was sitting alone at Altitude, Denver's premier rooftop restaurant, watching the city lights blur through my second glass of wine while the anniversary gift box grew heavier in my jacket pocket with each passing minute. 2.5 hours I'd been there, checking my phone every few minutes like some desperate teenager waiting for prom date confirmation, while the waiter James, who actually remembered us from our previous visits and had even asked how the lovely travel blogger was doing, kept refilling my water glass with increasingly sympathetic glances that made my situation feel even more pathetic. This was supposed to be our celebration dinner, marking both my massive promotion to senior project manager and our 2-year anniversary, the kind of night I'd been planning for 3 weeks with the meticulous attention to detail that had made me successful in sustainable architecture but apparently annoying in relationships. It's so important to me that we celebrate this together, I told Riley just that morning over coffee, explaining again how this promotion represented 5 years of grinding toward leadership of Denver's most ambitious green housing development. This changes everything for us financially, opens doors we've only dreamed about. She'd smiled that radiant blogger smile, kissed my cheek while already reaching for her phone to capture the golden morning light, and promised she'd be there looking amazing because she was so incredibly proud of her brilliant, dedicated boyfriend who deserves all the recognition in the world. The words had felt genuine in the moment, accompanied by her posting a story about preparing for a super special night celebrating my amazing man's incredible achievement, even asking her 75,000 followers to help choose between 2 dresses for our romantic evening out. Instead, I was watching her Instagram stories unfold in real time like some cruel social media documentary of my irrelevance. First a selfie at Prohibition, some trendy speakeasy downtown that charged $18 for cocktails with names like Forgotten Dreams and Lost Opportunities, accompanied by her college roommates who'd apparently decided on an impromptu reunion without consulting anyone's actual commitments. The captions evolved from unexpected girls' night brewing to sometimes the best therapy is spontaneous adventures with your favorite humans, while I sat at our corner table with an unopened bottle of Dom Perignon that cost more than most people's rent, the same champagne I'd specifically chosen because she'd mentioned it in a travel post about celebrations that deserve something extraordinary. Each story felt like a small betrayal, group shots of cocktails with captions about how unplanned nights always turn out to be the most magical, videos of them laughing at some inside joke from their sorority days, and finally a boomerang of Riley raising a martini with the words, living my most authentic life with my day one girls, while I explained to increasingly concerned restaurant staff that my dinner companion was just running a bit late. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was celebrating authenticity while abandoning the most important evening of our relationship for people she saw maybe twice a year and usually complained about afterward. The message finally came at 9:47 p.m., delivered with the casual thoughtlessness of someone ordering takeout. OMG babe, you're still at the restaurant? Oops, I totally went out with the girls and completely lost track of time. This is so unlike me, but they surprised me, and you know how it is with spontaneous plans. Rain check on tonight. I stared at those words for a full minute, watching the delivered notification turn to read, while my brain processed the mathematical impossibility of accidentally forgetting something we discussed daily for 3 weeks, something she'd posted about to 75,000 people just hours earlier. The casual oops hit hardest. Like our anniversary dinner was equivalent to forgetting to buy milk or missing a Netflix episode, not the culmination of my biggest career achievement and our relationship milestone falling on the same perfect evening I'd planned to propose a weekend trip to Napa Valley as our next adventure together. Something fundamental shifted in my chest in that moment, not heartbreak or even anger, but this crystalline clarity about what I'd been accepting as normal for 2 years, the constant rescheduling, the last-minute changes for better opportunities, the feeling that I was always competing with her next adventure for basic consideration in her life. I typed back, it's fine. Because what else do you say when someone reduces your most important evening to an afterthought, when pointing out the magnitude of their thoughtlessness would only make you look desperate and demanding rather than understanding and supportive? James approached with professional discretion, probably wondering if I'd been stood up or if there was some emergency, and I asked him to remove the second place setting because something had crystallized in that moment about what I'd been accepting as normal behavior from someone who claimed to love me. The champagne I'd ordered to toast our future stayed unopened beside the Napa Valley surprise that would never be given, while I sat there finishing my dinner and realizing this wasn't the first time I'd felt like an afterthought in Riley's carefully curated life. But to understand how a successful engineer ended up waiting alone at his own celebration dinner, I need to go back to the beginning, to a sustainability conference 2 years earlier where I met a travel blogger who seemed like everything I'd been missing, and trace the gradual transformation from partnership to me becoming someone's unpaid lifestyle coordinator. Meeting Riley had felt like finding the missing piece of my methodical, engineering-focused life. It was at a sustainability conference in downtown Denver where I was presenting my research on green building innovations and she was covering eco-friendly travel trends for her travel blog, which had grown to about 75,000 followers over 3 years of carefully curated Wanderlust content. She approached me after my presentation about net zero architecture, genuinely curious about how sustainable building design could enhance travel experiences, and I was immediately drawn to her energy, this vibrant, creative force who saw adventure and possibility where I saw blueprints and calculations. "You make saving the planet sound actually exciting," she'd laughed, and I found myself explaining building physics with more enthusiasm than I'd felt in years. Within weeks, we'd fallen into what seemed like a perfect rhythm, my structured world providing the stability and planning that made her creative dreams possible, while her spontaneous spirit pushed me out of my comfort zone and into experiences I'd never have chosen myself. The first year was magical in that way where opposites attract and complement each other, me handling logistics while she brought imagination to our weekend trips, her inspiring my work with her environmental passion while I grounded her more scattered tendencies with practical support and genuine interest in her blogging career. I'd spend evenings helping her research sustainable hotels for upcoming articles, calculating carbon footprints for various travel routes, and even learned basic photography techniques to help capture better content when we explored Colorado's national parks together. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the balance shifted from complementary partnership to something that felt more like me being the infrastructure that supported her lifestyle brand. She'd plan spontaneous trips to places like Telluride or Aspen, and I'd end up coordinating the transportation, booking accommodations, and covering most expenses since blogger income was inconsistent but totally worth it for the creative freedom. I started handling all our shared expenses, roughly 85% despite earning only twice her average monthly income, because her payments from brand partnerships arrived sporadically and she needed to maintain cash flow for content creation. The planning fell entirely to me too, dinner reservations, weekend activities, even researching locations for her photo shoots, all while she focused on the creative aspects that actually excited her. I told myself this was just how creative partnerships worked, that my systematic nature naturally suited logistics while her artistic vision needed protection from mundane details, but looking back, I was already becoming someone whose role was to make her life easier rather than someone whose life was being enhanced by partnership. She started referring to me as her amazing support system in her posts, which should have felt like appreciation but increasingly sounded like I was a service provider rather than a boyfriend, someone whose value came from what I could enable rather than who I was as a person. The pattern of broken promises escalated over 18 months from minor disappointments to moments that genuinely hurt, each one teaching me that I ranked somewhere below spontaneous opportunities on Riley's priority list. The first major blow came when she skipped my company's annual Architecture Awards ceremony, where I was receiving recognition for designing Denver's first net zero office building, a project that had consumed 2 years of my life and represented everything I'd worked toward in sustainable design. "I'm so excited to see you get honored," she'd said while helping me pick out a suit, even posting about her brilliant boyfriend's big night with heart emojis. But 3 days before the event, she announced she'd been invited to a sponsored wellness retreat in Aspen with some lifestyle influencers. "It's such an amazing opportunity for content," she explained, already packing her yoga mats and crystal collection, "and honestly, award ceremonies are kind of boring anyway, right? You'll just be sitting at a table eating chicken while people make speeches." I attended alone, watching colleagues bring their partners to celebrate career milestones while I explained Riley's absence with increasingly hollow excuses about work commitments, the award feeling empty in my hands because the person who was supposed to care most about my achievements was posting Instagram stories about sunrise meditation and organic smoothie bowls. The second devastating absence happened when my elderly grandmother visited Denver for what would be her final trip, specifically requesting to meet John's special girl she'd heard so much about in our weekly phone calls. "I can't wait to meet the woman who makes my grandson so happy," Grandma had said, and I'd planned a lovely dinner at her favorite restaurant, even researching gluten-free options for Riley's dietary restrictions. But the morning of our dinner, Riley received a last-minute collaboration offer from a luxury travel brand in Vail, a weekend at a 5-star resort that would absolutely transform her portfolio and open doors to bigger partnerships. I sat across from my confused grandmother, explaining why the chair beside me was empty while she repeatedly asked if Riley was feeling well, the disappointment in her voice making my chest tight with shame for defending someone who couldn't prioritize a single evening for family. The most crushing abandonment came 6 months later when my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and Riley missed his memorial service because she'd committed to a digital detox retreat in Sedona that she claimed would help her reconnect with her authentic voice as a creator. Even as I called her sobbing with the news, even as I explained that Dad had always asked about her and considered her part of our family, she insisted she couldn't break her commitment to the retreat facilitators who were counting on her to document the transformative experience. I buried my father surrounded by family and friends who all noticed her glaring absence, their careful questions about whether she was okay, making it clear that everyone could see what I was trying not to acknowledge, that I was grieving alone because the person who claimed to love me couldn't interrupt her personal brand development for my family crisis. She sent condolences via text from a yoga session, including a selfie with a sunset and caption about sending love and light during difficult times, as if my father's death was content for her spiritual journey rather than the most devastating loss of my life. The promotion to senior project manager represented 5 years of grinding through 70-hour weeks, weekend certifications in green building technology, and countless nights studying LEED standards until my eyes burned, all building toward this moment when I'd finally lead Denver's most ambitious sustainable housing development. The $30,000 salary increase meant we could finally afford the international trips Riley constantly talked about for her blog, the security deposit on a better apartment, and maybe even start planning the future I'd been quietly hoping we'd build together. I'd specifically chosen Altitude Restaurant for our celebration because it was where we'd had our first official date 2 years earlier, the same corner table where she told me I was unlike anyone she'd ever met, and where I'd first started imagining what our life could look like if we both chose to build it together. For 3 weeks, I'd been reminding her about this dinner's importance, explaining how the promotion would transform not just my career but our entire financial landscape, how it meant I could finally support her travel blogging dreams properly while we built something stable underneath the adventure. "This is huge for us," I'd told her repeatedly. "It changes everything about what we can plan for our future." She'd gotten genuinely excited, posting teaser content about celebrating her amazingly dedicated boyfriend's incredible achievement, and even asking her followers to help choose between 2 dresses for our special night out. I'd made reservations for 7 p.m., confirmed them twice, and even arranged for a surprise weekend trip to Napa Valley as our dual celebration. The promotion and our 2-year anniversary falling in the same week felt like the universe aligning to mark this new chapter of our relationship. The Napa trip was tucked in an envelope in my jacket pocket, along with a small gift I'd commissioned from a local artist, a custom illustration of the Denver skyline showing the buildings I'd helped design, including the net zero office that had launched my career toward this promotion. I'd arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, wanting everything to be perfect, and spent the first hour checking my phone occasionally, assuming she was running late from a photo shoot or dealing with some last-minute blog deadline that always seemed to crop up when we had plans. But as 8 p.m. became 8:30, then 9 p.m., I started watching her Instagram stories with growing disbelief. First a selfie at some trendy speakeasy downtown with college roommates who'd apparently decided on an impromptu reunion, then group shots of cocktails with captions about unexpected girls' nights being the absolute best kind of therapy, followed by videos of them laughing at some private joke while I sat alone at our anniversary table with an unopened bottle of champagne and our waiter, making increasingly awkward small talk about whether my dinner companion was still coming. When her text finally arrived at 9:47 p.m., "OMG babe, you're still at the restaurant." Oops, I totally went out with the girls and lost track of time. Rain check. I stared at those words until they blurred, realizing that the most important professional moment of my life, combined with our relationship milestone, had been completely forgotten in favor of spontaneous drinks with people she saw maybe twice a year. Rather than exploding with the anger burning through my chest or demanding explanations that would only lead to more excuses about spontaneous opportunities and lost track of time, I chose a systematic approach that reflected both my engineering mindset and the crystalline clarity I'd gained about our relationship's true nature over 2.5 hours of sitting alone at our anniversary table. The next week, while Riley was on a sponsored glamping trip in Moab posting Instagram content about finding yourself in nature's cathedral and disconnecting to reconnect with your authentic self, I secured a loft apartment in Denver's Arts District, arranged professional movers for the following Sunday, and methodically began extracting myself from every shared financial obligation we'd accumulated over 2 years of me subsidizing her lifestyle. I gave my landlord notice, transferred the utilities back to Riley's name, and closed our joint checking account that had somehow become a one-way funnel for my salary to fund her travel content creation and designer coffee habit. The process felt oddly therapeutic, like debugging code or reviewing architectural plans for structural flaws. Each step revealed just how much of my life had been reorganized around making her dreams possible while my own needs became secondary considerations. On Saturday evening, I packed only my belongings, clothes, books, my drafting equipment, and the guitar I'd barely touched since we started dating because she found practicing kind of repetitive and distracting when she was trying to create content. I left behind all the expensive furniture and kitchen appliances I'd purchased over the months, partly because I didn't want the hassle of moving them, but mostly because they'd become props for her lifestyle posts rather than things that made our shared space feel like home. The Italian espresso machine I'd bought for her morning routine, the designer dining table where she staged her healthy breakfast photos, the vintage leather couch that appeared in half her sponsored posts, all of it stayed behind like remnants of someone else's life that I'd somehow been funding without realizing it. Sunday evening, after the movers had efficiently transferred my surprisingly small collection of personal possessions to my new Arts District loft, I left a brief note on our kitchen counter next to my keys. "Riley, I've moved out and ended our shared commitments. I finally understand that love shouldn't feel like waiting for someone to remember you exist. I hope you find someone whose company you prefer to spontaneous girls' nights. I won't be available to find out. John." No dramatic confrontation, no itemized list of grievances, no demands for explanations or apologies, just a clean, definitive conclusion to what had gradually become a business arrangement where I provided financial stability and logistical support while she provided content for her personal brand and occasional companionship when nothing more interesting was available. Without my substantial financial support covering roughly 85% of her expenses, Riley's carefully curated lifestyle began unraveling with mathematical precision as reality crashed into her blog income, which had never been sufficient to sustain the expensive downtown apartment, frequent travel, and designer, everything that had become essential elements of her personal brand. Within 6 weeks, she'd been forced to downsize to a studio apartment in a less photogenic neighborhood, and I watched through mutual friends' casual updates as several brand partnerships dissolved when she could no longer provide the luxury travel and lifestyle imagery companies had been paying her to promote. Turns out, authentic wanderlust content required a budget she'd never actually possessed. Her Instagram posts shifted from effortless luxury to obvious budget constraints, sponsored glamping trips replaced by local hiking trails, artisanal coffee shops swapped for grocery store brands, and the confident captions about living her best life gradually replaced by inspirational quotes about finding beauty in simplicity and authentic experiences don't require expensive settings. Meanwhile, my life flourished in ways I hadn't experienced since college, starting with joining a rock climbing group that explored Colorado's peaks every weekend, their genuine enthusiasm for adventure reminding me what it felt like to be around people who shared interests rather than just tolerated them. I rediscovered my love for pottery, taking evening classes in my Arts District neighborhood where I met Sophie, a pediatric nurse who shared my passion for hiking and actually showed up early to every date while insisting on splitting all expenses because that's what equal partners do. The contrast was remarkable. Sophie and I would spend Saturday mornings climbing Garden of the Gods, then return to my loft to cook dinner together and have actual conversations about our work and dreams, her asking genuine questions about sustainable architecture while sharing stories about helping kids overcome medical challenges that made my building projects seem both important and properly scaled. We'd sit on my fire escape with coffee and sketchbooks, her reading while I worked on design concepts, both of us comfortable in silence that felt connected rather than ignored, and when she looked up from her book to comment on something funny or interesting, I realized how long it had been since anyone had actually listened to my responses rather than just waiting for their turn to talk about themselves. Our relationship developed naturally around shared values and mutual respect rather than me reorganizing my life to accommodate someone else's need for constant entertainment and financial support. Sophie celebrated my work achievements with genuine pride, asked thoughtful questions about my projects, and even helped research sustainable building materials for my housing development because she found the environmental impact genuinely interesting rather than just something to tolerate about my personality. When she suggested weekend trips, she came with research about hiking trails and budget-friendly accommodations, contributing her own ideas and splitting costs because she wanted to build experiences together rather than having them provided for her consumption and social media documentation. 10 months after my silent exit from Riley's life, she appeared at my Arts District building on a snowy December morning, having tracked down my address through mutual friends who thought they were helping two people meant to be together reconnect after some misunderstanding rather than enabling someone to pursue a man who'd deliberately chosen to disappear from her world. I spotted her through my loft's industrial windows, standing in the lobby looking markedly different from the polished lifestyle blogger I dated, less curated, more vulnerable, wearing simple winter clothes instead of the carefully coordinated outfits that used to serve as content for her travel posts. Her hair unstyled and her face makeup-free in a way that might have been refreshing if it didn't obviously represent desperation rather than authentic choice. When she called up through the building's intercom system, her voice carried a trembling quality I'd never heard before, and despite every instinct telling me to ignore her entirely, I buzzed her up because some part of me needed to hear what possible justification she could offer for tracking me down after I'd made my position abundantly clear through my complete absence from her life. She knocked softly, almost hesitantly, and when I opened the door, her eyes immediately swept my loft with obvious surprise. The pottery wheel in the corner, climbing gear organized on custom-built shelves, architectural drawings spread across a drafting table, and Sophie's nursing textbooks stacked on the coffee table, all of it representing a life that had clearly flourished without her presence in ways she'd never imagined possible. "Marcus, I know I have no right to be here," she began, her pitch sounding rehearsed yet desperate, "but I've been in therapy for 6 months working through my commitment issues and finally understanding how selfish I was, how I took you for granted and destroyed something beautiful because I was scared of how real it was getting." She talked about recognizing patterns of self-sabotage, about learning to prioritize relationships over career opportunities, about realizing that spontaneous adventures meant nothing without someone meaningful to share them with, and about understanding that she'd thrown away her best chance at genuine partnership for the illusion of freedom that had left her lonelier than she'd ever imagined possible. When she finally asked if there was any chance for reconciliation, if we could maybe start slowly as friends and rebuild what we'd lost, I looked at this woman who'd once made me feel like I was never quite important enough to prioritize and felt only the calm satisfaction of someone who'd learned his own worth. "Riley, I appreciate that you've been working on yourself, and I genuinely hope therapy helps you build better relationships in the future," I said, my voice steady and kind but absolutely final. "But you didn't just forget our anniversary dinner. You showed me that I wasn't important enough to remember, and that's not something therapy can fix because it wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And now I've chosen differently too." The conversation ended with her crying in my building's lobby while I felt only relief and gratitude for finally understanding that loving myself meant refusing to return to a dynamic that had systematically eroded my self-worth, no matter how much someone might claim to have changed after losing access to what I'd provided.